here. Good morning from here. Good afternoon to some of us. Uh, and of course, good evening to some of us. I am Mazi Chika Austin. And we're here once again to look at issues of importance. We're here once again to look at issues of concern, and which I think it has been submissions of some individuals. I've read, I've watched an effort of some individuals to come up with this argument dimension. People coming to say, the powers that be. I'm using their descriptive language. The powers that be are not going to support for the disintegration of Nigerian state. I don't know if you have heard such a thing, but I know it's a common mantra. Excuse me. It's a common mantra. We see among those who decided to look at issue from peripheral perspectives, and it's unfortunate. Some persons sometimes take such junk, hook, line, and sinker, and that is why we are here to give justice to that. I'm not going to be speaking so fast because I would want, especially the proponents of this theory of that the powers that be are not going to support the restoration of Biafra or the disintegration of Nigeria. I would like the proponents of those that theory to carefully and patiently follow up, various allusions, references I'm going to fall back to, very, very important, because these references are historical, they are evidential, they are factuals, and above all, they are tangible. These reference points we are going to unearth, we are going to invoke, are things you will just get in there. So we are looking at hard truth is that submission. People say the powers that be can never allow international community, their interest, they will never allow Nigeria to disintegrate. Well, when I hear ones bringing up such submission, when I hear such submission coming from some individuals, I have a classification of such individuals as being peripherally educated, not necessarily being knowledgeable about how or the progression or evolution of international systems. This is where I find it so disheartening and unfortunate that people are too myopic not to know the trend or the projections of global events. First of all, if someone said that the powers that be, you should understand when they say the powers that be, they're talking about international stakeholders, that they are not going to allow for Nigeria disintegration. And when people say that, the first question I love bringing up is, why? Why do you think the United States cannot condone the end of Nigeria, why do you think the European Union cannot condone the end of Nigeria? Why do you think the UK cannot condone it? Why do you think that if that happens, China will be in extinction? Why do you think about that? It's enough to, it's one thing to say something, and another thing is to give it a teeth. And the teeth that such word requires is strong evidence. When you have strong evidence, or evidences, you understand me? When you have strong evidences or facts you're presenting, it makes clear, it gives a strong potency to whatever you're claiming. And it's unfortunate because people in this part of the world swallow things hook, line, and sinker. I think that is one of the efforts of this movement, to recreate the consciousness in a man, to force us into having a critical evaluation, not necessarily telling us it is 3 and we just not counting, we put in a pocket. No, this struggle is doing everything possible to make us rational in thinking, to make us critical in evaluation, to make us, above all, people who always raise questions. And this is one thing I have found wanting among these proponents of this theory, that no international community can condone the end or the demise, of the Nigerian state. This is so deep that when you press forward to get why, because every action have cause. There's what we call causation. If there is no cause, there will be nothing like end action. So if you say the international communities are not going to allow that, the question I want to ask is why? Because to me, there are 2 or 3 fundamental reasons why an international community or stakeholders would not allow the end of an entity. One is economic interest. What is the economic interest of such nation? 2 is political interest. And if you look at political interest, please, you have to forgive my slow speech. I want us to understand. I want everyone to be carried along. And if you look at political interest, you can now break it down to geopolitical interest. You break it down further to military interest. You understand me? What actually is, just when you look at political interest, you break it down to what is the geopolitical importance of that entity. What I mean by geopolitical importance of an entity is this. Egypt is a geopolitical interest to the Western world because of Suez Canal. Egypt hosts Suez Canal, and Suez Canal is always a boycott to trade within the Middle East. So Egypt is so important to Israel because of Suez Canal. So Egypt is a geopolitical relevant entity for the state of Israel. Now, another thing you might consider is the security interest. You understand me? Now, let's fall back, let's take it bit upon bit. One of the 2 things, as I have earlier stated, that will make a superpower to say, okay, let us keep on consolidating this structure, will be the viability, the economic viability of that entity, and the political importance or relevancy of that that entity. And let's look at Nigeria from objective point of view. Economically speaking, how viable is Nigeria? Economically speaking, how viable is Nigeria? Is Nigeria economic viability pro-West? These are things we are going to look at. And that's why I would want the proponents of One Nigeria, or those who come up with that statement that the powers that be will never allow this country to divide, I would want them to come in here so that as time progresses, I add them up so that we break down in piecemeals the indices of political international politics down to a piecemeal point. That is exactly what we want to do. Let's look at the viability of Nigeria. Let's look at how important Nigeria is as this time we are talking about, so that you would now agree whether the anticipated support Ipob is seeking among the international community, if it's going to be a workable thing. And that's all we are trying to do. So let's look at the economic viability of the entity called Nigeria. Every country is dependent to another country. Take note of that. There is no country that enjoys absolute freedom. You must have a measure at which there is foreign interference. There is no country on earth that enjoys absolute independence. In fact, the word independent is relative. You must understand. If you're independent on agro, you might be dependent in pharmaceutical products. If you're independent in pharmaceutical, you might be dependent on military hardware. So that's why there's no absolute independence. And that also points to this fact that the Biafra we are yearning for, we are calling upon, is equally going to be dependent on some areas until she attains a certain level. Like Israel is doing wonderful, virtually wonderful in every sector. But we also know that when it comes to military software and hardware development, Israel have a relative dependence in United States. Take for instance the Iron Dome they are using, the F-35 that IDF is flying, currently, they are all sourced from Pentagon, thereby making Israel to be, to an extent, militarily dependent on United States. So you can now understand what we are talking about. I'm trying to build a foundation so that you understand where we're coming. Now, coming back to the Nigerian state and her viability. Is Nigeria economic viable to the Western world today? And I want to tell people, this idea of approaching international politics with conservative explanation is simply out of context. What do I mean? What is obtainable in 1960 might not be obtainable in 2020. Because people have tried in most cases to interpret the activities of international politics from conservative, from orthodox approach, from conservative approach against the evolutionary approach or progressive approach. To me, international politics is progressive. It's not static. It's not unique. Rather, it is dynamic. How do I mean? That Britain fought against Biafra in 1967 does not mean that in 2020 Britain cannot review her policy of 1967. If you think conservatively, or you are interpreting international politics from conservative point of view, definitely you are not part of this world. Because policies change, interests are being adjusted, and the world progresses. So that it is. So in terms of economic viability, one of the reasons why Britain stood strongly on the side of the Nigerian state as of the time of the Civil War, one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, is better I point out the reason, was that Britain had wanted to have a large, viable state in Africa. A large, viable state. Viability in the sense that being economically viable, being politically stable, being militarily enforcing. So that through her, British influence in Africa geopolitics would be properly reached out. So Britain felt that having Nigeria there would have been a very big footprint, a prosy footprint to the African geopolitics. Unfortunately, that dream could not survive as a result of the poor leadership skills of the Northerners. And you should equally remember, as of this time we are talking about, oil was the the bedrock of international trade and investments. Of course, oil was at the bedrock. Because if you remember the 1970s oil crisis, when the Arab nations, oil-producing countries, went on meetings and lock up the production, because United States and some Western nations supported Israel against the 7 Days War. You understand me? They now protested against America's support to Israel by stopping production. And immediately they stopped production, a lot of factories in Western nations were all affected. So to Britain, Nigeria being an oil-producing nation can be used as a mitigational point. Even though the Arabs decide to repeat such a thing, they can source oil from Nigeria against the blockades from Arab nations. So, as of that time, the realities of that time points towards need to support one Nigerian project. But today, oil is selling on negation. We saw during the COVID-19, 2 months ago, a month plus, we saw oil selling on minus, to the extent that those who were producing were paying those who were buying. Even today, we have seen that there are more competitors, there are more producers outside Arab nations. And these individuals, these nation states that are producing outside Arab countries, are now an alternative to Western countries. So Nigeria's juicy position is currently contended, thereby making her not a viable point economically. And mind you, because we are talking about factors that can make make a nation to be supported by powers that be. I'm talking about countries, and we're talking about economic viability. And as far as Nigeria market is concerned, Nigeria is not currently viable. In fact, she is not integrated into the global market platform. Have you ever heard of Nigeria stock? reflecting in European stock, reflecting in Wall Street, reflecting in the best global trading companies. No. So she is not a viable market. And because she's not viable, she's not attractive for any nation to stake her resources in defense of an inviability or non-viability entity. So you can understand what we are talking about. And also, you should equally take into cognizance this fact that Nigeria market, as it is currently does not have what we call purchasing power mechanism. What do I mean by purchasing power? We are analyzing Nigeria market. We have analyzed the oil, and we have arrived to that fact that Nigeria oil is facing huge competitors as a result of much producers are in the market, and America has succeeded in penetrating OPEC, regulating how price, the OPEC price mechanism. So the Western world are not going to stake much for Nigeria, because Nigeria is not playing a major role, even in oil. Because America produces, America influences OPEC market, oil market. America have other nation states that are in high production of oil, not just producing of oil, but producing an international standard. That is what most people don't know. You can produce a product, but it is substandard. And as far as international oil products rating is concerned, Nigeria is still falling behind. So another thing we are looking at is what is the ratio of purchasing power in Nigerian market that will make Western nations to stake for the survival of such entity. If you look at Nigeria purchasing power, what we are talking is purely economic issues here. An average Nigerian earns below $1 a day. That is the statistics. An average Nigerian earns below $1 a day. So if an average Nigerian earns below $1, how much do you think he can spend for himself in a day? In a simple arithmetic, banks are paying their staff some 30-something thousand naira, some 50,000. Divide it by 30. How much such person is earning every day? I think it's less than $5. So if people are earning below $1 in a day, how much do you think those people can spend in basic goods and services, and by extension what we call ostentatious goods or luxurious items? If I have a low income, my low income is going to regulate my expenditure. As a result of regulation in expenditure, it affects consumption. And because it's affecting, the low income is affecting consumption, consumption affects production. It's just a vicious circle thing. They are two interconnected. And because it's affecting production, people are not selling what they have. It will affect both savings in banking transaction, because one who is producing sometimes source loan from the bank with intention to sell and return back, and the one who is having a reasonable income will have a need to save in the bank, thereby making the financial institution viable. It's a vicious circle thing. They are two interconnected. But when you look at Nigerian state, looking at the purchasing power among over 70% of our population, you would understand that no Western nation would be interested to stake in such porous and the poor purchasing power because they know that Nigeria purchasing strength, the purchasing power of an average Nigerian cannot buy iPhone. A purchasing power of an average Nigerian cannot buy a brand new Toyota product. How much more buying GM, General Motors, that is American product, buying, what is it called? Buying Ford, buying Buick, buying all those expensive products of United States. So when these people have a purchasing power and they cannot afford the products of the Western world, then how do you expect the Western world to be committed to the progress of such markets? We are trying to break down a real factors you see that consider foreign policy mechanism of nations. Take for instance, some people will say, but Nigeria is a very big, a large market, like some of us who ignorantly argue. What makes a market strong is not just how large it is. What Japan, which is relatively smaller than Nigeria, is consuming, for instance, what Apple is making, Apple phones, which is American product, what Apple generates in Japan is far much, Japan that is small, is far much to what Apple generates in Nigerian market. The simple logic there is that the citizens of Japan, they have a high purchasing power. They have a high income, so they can spend on basic items and ostentatious goods. But the person in Nigeria is still struggling to spend on food. He's struggling. He has not solved the food expenditure. He's just struggling to consolidate in meal expenses. Then how can he afford an Apple phone? How can he afford iPhone? So you can now understand that it's not all about how vast the country is. Rather, you consider strong internal propellers. You look at GDP, you look at per capita income, you look at other economic indices. Because these are what these countries consider in order to move on. So, economically speaking, Nigeria is not viable for any country to stake on. And somehow, because these Western companies or multinational companies cannot, have their products access Nigerian market because of poor purchasing power. China, that has a very complex economic system, because remember, these Western companies or Western producers have a standard at which they produce, and it doesn't matter whether you like it or not, they maintain their standard because of high regulative measures. Agencies that regulate, that standardize their products are always on active watch. So as a result of that, they know that they cannot adjust to their standard because they want to penetrate Nigerian market. Apple cannot go below their standard because they want to sell a cheap item. You understand me? So that is, if you look at these things, they are just powerful indices on ground. Apple cannot sell her product. Apple cannot adjust her quality. She cannot go below her quality control mechanism because she wants to access Nigerian market. So, but there is a competitive player, which is China, that is ready to adjust even to the zero level just to make sure she penetrates such a poor purchasing power market. And it's as a result of that China had advantage, because the Western countries cannot go below their quality control standard. But Chinese are ready to even go below, even to zero minus, to go on negation, just to make sure they give you what you can buy and not what you ought to have gotten. They produce according to your purchasing power, but the Western nations cannot produce according to your purchasing power. They produce according to their own standard regulations. So as a result of this, China penetrates, and because China has penetrated as a result of her internal economic policy strategy, economic policy strategies, which has to do with adjusting. They are flexible in adjusting just to make sure they have their way. Nigeria market becomes a pro-Chinese market, thereby activating jealousy from the Western front. You know why I'm taking time to make this thing to be clear to us, so that those who are half educated, who they are, in the language of Obasanjo, they half-baked Nigerians who argue blindly would understand how the whole thing works. So because of this, they ran to China, because there is no local productive strength. There is no factory to produce according to the local purchasing power, but they need those items. So they have to open the market for Chinese, and the Chinese have to enter. As Chinese enter, they take control of the economy, and he who is in charge of the economy regulates your political activities directly or indirectly. And because Chinese have penetrated the economy, because the Chinese are in charge of the economy, it activates jealousy from Western front. Because the Western diplomats understand that in as much as China have upper hand in Nigerian economy, in Nigerian market, they have a reasonable influence in Nigerian foreign policy. They will definitely regulate how Nigeria relates with a lot of countries. And that was how Nigeria became an enemy of the Western nations. Because to the Western nations, they believe that the right microeconomic policies, right initiation of right microeconomic policies, plus the implementation will boost purchasing power. You see, these are two different ways. The Western world are not ready to adjust, to compromise their standard. You understand me? The Western nations are not ready to compromise their standard because they want to access your market. But they want you to do the right thing, for you to review your economic policies in order to boost the income of your citizens, which the Nigerian leaders don't have the mental capacity and the moral strength to do that. They don't have the mental capacity in most cases because most of them don't even know what political economy is all about. They don't have the moral will because most of them are kleptomaniacs. They are kleptomaniacs who believe in stealing. So they are not pro-people. They are not people-oriented. They are not thinking about the well-being of the people, which the Western nations, their own strategy is that you have to restructure your internal microeconomic policies, have an effective implementation so that the people will earn more. Then they can purchase our products. They can be fit to purchase our services. But Chinese system is, we don't care what the people are doing. If your political system is porous, if it's comatose, we are going to even help them to be more corrupt, but produce according to what you people can afford. So if you people can afford chalk in place of drugs, we will mold it for you and send to you. And that's why it seems to be favorable to the Nigerian political system, because China is not going to tell you about human rights. She's not going to tell you about whether you're doing the right thing or not. But all is interested is flood your market, get the money, and get out. So because of these things, these guys attracted jealousy from the Western world. That is how Nigeria got it wrong. That is how Nigeria gets where it is today, to the extent that the Western nations are not interested for the continuation of such disgrace to humanity. And this is where I have issues with those who say the powers that be will never allow Nigeria to disintegrate. They don't even have the intellectual strength to look at these indices. They just talk, and that is the end of their discussion. If you ask them, why do you think so? They will just say, I've said it, I've said it, I've said it. They don't understand the place of evolution in international politics. They don't understand the place of dynamic of international politics. Neither do they even understand the principles guiding it. So these are things we are talking about. So economically speaking, Nigeria is not viable. And because she is not viable, according to Western nations' definition of economic viability, they will never stake anything in defense or in continuation of such disgrace. And let's look at political viability. Very, very important. Very, very important. So let's look at political viability. There are things that make, there are things that make Western nations to, apart from economic viability, which we've just talked about. And there is another thing that nations consider, or the powers that be consider before they throw their weight on a nation. I told us one of them is economy, one is politics. And let's ask ourselves, politically, and politics, we are going to look at the geostrategic of Nigerian state. Is Nigeria geographically situated in a strategic angle? Then another thing we must look at is the level of cohesion. Very, very important. The level of national cohesion. Politically speaking, Nigerian foreign policy, as it currently is today, is working towards engaging the West, is working towards aligning with the East, the Chinese. There is this ongoing, most of you don't know that officially America has entered into a Cold War with China. America has officially rated China as the #1 enemy and a threat to the United States, which means not just China, but all the friends of China are currently seen as enemies of the United States. This is official statement. I'm not saying, I'm telling you what is gazetted in White House. Department of State is working on that. Pentagon is working on that. All American agencies are already disposed for the implementation of this. So, and there is an alliance ongoing now between Iran, Turkey, China, Venezuela, and somehow South Africa is on the crossroad. And what are these guys trying to do? They are, trying to build an international front that is going to oppose United States. I repeat, Iran, Turkey, China, Venezuela, Nigeria. There is a soft international front that are being initiated to confront United States. And United States knows about that. So how will you tell me that a country that its political ideology is antithetical to Western political ideology will be supported by a Western front? It's just a simple question. For those of them that say, Western countries will never allow Nigeria, it's a simple question. United States worked against the front USSR because of ideological differences, political ideological differences. Same United States and Israel worked against old Sudan because of Sudanese political ideological difference. Same implied in the same old Korea, when you had North and South Korea fused together. It's all about ideological difference. And today Nigeria is antithetical, strongly pro-China. So if there is anything the West would want to achieve, they want to cut this growing threat in Nigeria. And what is that growing threat? If they don't tame it, it's going to grow in a way that the West will suffer in Africa, which Nigeria is going to lead, what they are suffering in South America in the hand of Venezuela. And this is what they would want. So tell me how they are going to trust or support a political ideology that is antithetical to their own political ideology. This is what these urchins don't tell us. They just come on national TV and say, hey, the West will not support it. Man, can you measure the level of Western interest in Nigeria? What is the measure of Western interest in Nigeria? How many times had current American president visited Nigeria? Even the former secretary of the state that visited was fired because he visited. Boston, the former secretary of defense, secretary of defense, that wrote a paper, even reviewed in a paper that this current United States government was planning to stop yearly aid America used to give to Nigeria. Until today, the United States has not delivered the Tucano aircraft. And one idiot will come out from somewhere and say, no, US will. What do you know? Are you reading interpreting your own international politics from moon? Are you not part of this world? We are pointing evidences, we are pointing references that are, tangible, things you can even source. So politically speaking, Nigeria is in opposite dimension with the Western Front. And people don't understand, I always say it without missing a word. There is a strong international coalition for intervention in Nigeria. And I will not speak deeper on that. But those, especially the Biafran community, are really, really following every single development. Of course. That is just the way it is. People don't understand. So, and they know, I'm talking about the Nigerian state. The Nigerian state knows about this. That there is at the final verge of final completion of international intervention under the umbrella of coming to save the persecuted Christians in Nigeria. And let me tell you, write it down, there is nowhere America passes through that remains the same. There is no way. If America is almost completing to intervene militarily in Nigeria, there is no way America passed through militarily that remains the same. If you want me to show you an example, I will show you an example. America stepped into Iraq, and the Kurdish people got an internal sovereignty to the extent they have their own Peshmerga, their own military, they control their resources and all this. America just passed through Syria recently and is ongoing. The Syrian Kurdish, SDP, I think, yes, SDP or something like that, start enjoying their internal sovereignty. They have their own military, they are defending their soil. And America understands that. I don't know, it's on your own personal interpretation to tell me what might happen when immediately America crosses over. You know? So, so I will not dig deep to that point. Sorry, I just greeted. I will not dig deep to that point, but I think you can interpret better than me what might be the result of American passage on Nigeria. So that is by the way. We have talked the economic viability. We have talked about the political viability. Now let's talk, which will be the last thing, because we are going to look at the bargain. IPOB bargaining resources. Let's just look at IPOB bargaining resources. Does IPOB have the resources to bargain? And what I'm going to review to you is going to be shocking to you. I don't think it's going to be shocking to us because we're always acquainted with the basic information. Please, you can still be adding requests to join us if you feel like coming in to contribute. But let's look at our bargaining resources. We are currently, statistically speaking, we are currently the only race, talking about the Biafran race, we are the only race that have footprint in our country of the world. We are the only black race that enjoy that opportunity. Also, by extension, we are the only race that has what it takes to cause a global concern simultaneously, to stage international pressure simultaneously. I mean, it will be happening in every country of the world. And no country, no player, not just a country, no player in international stage would want to underrate people with such resources. And that is the advantage of Israel today, because they harness properly their diaspora advantage. They use their diaspora advantage to kick ass any country or group of people that feel to threaten the state of Israel. And I think one thing I see IPOB galvanizing among us, which nobody knows that this is, you can have a resources but don't know the importance of that resources. Ohaneze never took time to harness these resources. The so-called governors, politicians never find it pertinent to galvanize and harness these resources. What resources am I talking about? I'm talking about our diaspora strength. What does it imply? It is only us that don't ship diplomas to countries we want to engage on. We don't ship diplomas. we don't transport diplomats. We activate existing human resources in those countries. And those existing human resources we activate are the indigenous people of Biafra, who have a linguistic advantage to the host country, who have contacts to some of the politicians of the host countries. And when a people have such diaspora strength, it will be so difficult for you to track. It will be so difficult for you to destroy them. Because in this case, you don't expect IPOB, you don't wait to see IPOBs or IPOB officials in your airport when they will be traveling through Lagos or through Abuja. Then you say, let me arrest their diplomats. You won't have such opportunity because their diplomats are already domiciled in all these countries of the world, thereby putting consistently pressure to the politicians of these host countries. And this is what no one took as a responsibility to harness, to maximize, except IPOB. And that is why it is so difficult for you to destroy such platform. Because if it is a platform that is domestically operational, as in her human resources are being moved from home to wherever, it could have been a very complex one. You can use international immigration manipulations to hold them down, to frustrate their meetings and all this. But this is a movement that is domiciled in all the countries of the world. And when they want to engage, they use their people in those countries to do the engagement. So you can now appreciate the two line of action. And this is what the world knows better than I. They know better than you. That when Nigeria declared IPOB a terrorist organization, the Western politicians were afraid to buy into that jump because they understand how they will heat up consistent protest, which they don't want on their street. They understand how Biafrans, residents in all these countries, are going to make sure they keep them restless, they keep their government houses so disturbed that they will regret taking that action. So, intelligently, what the Western diplomats did was to advise their home nations to stay away from buying into that junk, because they understand the implication. They take a demographic study of our penetration in their lands. They know that we are not just blacks who are resident in their home. They understand that we have married their women, their men have married our ladies. We have given birth to our children that exactly looks like them. And we have the power to move our children, these Biafrans in blood, but their countries on skin. They understand we have the power to mobilize. This is one of the advantages the Jews have that made them to shake the world, and they are still shaking the world today. So they understand that you have even raised children that looks like them, and you can stir up them to ask questions that will blow up the entire society, and they don't want. And this is how dangerous the whole thing is. This is why it will be so expensive for any country to support Nigeria in any future skirmishes between them and us. No country will dare that. Why no country will dare it is because every country on earth have a stake in Biafra. I think this will be another topic Most of you people don't understand what director meant by a rainbow color nation. Every country on earth has a stake in Biafra. How? They have their children, they have their daughters who have gotten married to the Biafran and raise a kid that looks like them. And they understand the importance of these kids to their relationship with Biafra in future. We are talking about high international politics. High international politics. That is what we are talking about. So all what these countries are doing is, let's support these people to get what they are getting. Beside, they have kids that looks like them that will be in this country. So it's not going to be a black race, so to say. It's a fulfillment of the scripture. I think I can get that portion of the scripture. Jeremiah was saying Israel is like a sparkling bed. Do you know what sparkling means? Sparkling simply means something without one single color. I think this is a side we are hiding from our Israeli cousins, because that portion of the scripture, Jeremiah, I will post that portion of scripture where the Bible says Israel is like a sparkling bed. And if you look at Israel of today, they don't have that feature. They don't have that feature. The only nation that is having that feature, Jeremiah prophesied, is the Biafran nation. Because it's only Biafran nation, as I speak to you, that you see all race will be part of. Because we have married their children, they have married ours, we have done crossbreeding. Thereby, it's only in Biafra you will see the 7 continents reflected. The 7 continents of the world, you will see their skin reflected in the Biafran nation. I mean 7 continents, including Atlantica. If there is human species existing there, you will see their skin, their color registered in Biafran land. And is in line with the prophecy Jeremiah said, Israel is like a sparkling bed. I will get the quotation that I promise. So we always hide it from our Israeli brothers because they have not really, they don't find themselves reflecting that prophecy. They are not close, and it activates jealousy. It's only us that are close to that prophecy. Prophecy of Israel is like a sparkling bed. Okay, we must move ahead. So what am I trying to say? We have this diaspora strength. We have this diaspora strength that no one else has. Another bargaining power we have is our resources, which most of you don't know. Biafra have hundreds of thousands of deposits, tapped and untapped, harnessed and unharnessed. Very, very important. Most people know about that. And these resources is equally a tool of bargaining for us. I mean, it is a tool of bargaining, because those who are likely to work with us understand that the resources they were given earlier by the Fulanis is not even theirs. Those who are using our resources to buy them, we are buying them with stolen resources. And why they could do that uninterrupted is because the owners were not awake. But now the owners are awake and they're asking questions. these individuals, as you see, are now reconsidering to deal directly with the owners than those who stole it. Why those who stole it could bargain with our resources and resources successfully? Because we were asleep. Everybody was lying fallow. But now we are putting up a strong demand. They are revealing because they will prefer to deal directly with the owners than the middlemen. And no wonder you see a series of meetings ongoing now, which we are not here to start detailing. And that is what is happening. So, because of our time, we are going to see how to round up in the next. It's just 1 hour, so we'll talk